Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Well, now we are joined by 10th Man, Refracted Curvature, Neil Costantino, Chocolate Saiyan, and a whole bunch of people in Gilded. So welcome, one and all.
Nice catch, Nathan. Nice catch.
Good one. Hey, welcome everybody.
Hello. Good to have you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
What do you mean formally?
I mean, since 2020, 1st Jan, Black Swan, if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance to the horizon can be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet as per the Earth curve mathematics. The distance to the horizon in the Black Swan image is beyond those geometric limitations at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, which is where Earth curve would be. Therefore, there is no Earth curve. Now, we are told as a consequence... Nearly there, Neil. We are told as a consequence of that, we wouldn't expect to see Earth curve. So it's formally Earth curve. That would be the geometric horizon that boats and buildings were blocked by. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I get that. But people are still talking about the horizon like it is Earth curve. They're still talking about boats falling over the horizon, although they don't say that. We say that, and it gets them mad. So I don't think people are listening, Nathan.
You mean they don't say that? It's in their calculations. It's part of the calculator. They tell you in feet and inches or meters how much a boat or building is blocked by the Earth curve that they say is in that calculation at 1.2 times the square root of the observer. So that's Earth curve. It's supposed to be blocking boats and buildings. They tell you how much it's blocking boats and buildings by in that maths. That's Earth curve. It's the horizon. It's just been debunked by the Black Swan.
In that calculator, does it have sea level on it?
It does. It does indeed. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
Well, sea level ain't a good start.
I mean, you're probably going to acquire your R value using the level surface that we actually dwell atop. I mean, that is a fact, in fact.
And then we play pretend that that flat surface is a sphere. Why would we do that?
We don't do that. That's the step that the opponents on the globe side do. So that is the step of reification. We can admire the heliocentric model. We can describe how a flat plane is used to create that spherical model of the world. But it doesn't mean that we reify that flat earth translation to spherical geometry as the world we actually stand upon. And it's actually not necessarily foist upon anybody, unless you can correct me, which you may well do, to reify it either. It's never implicitly stated that it's a model, and it's implied that you live in that world. But with enough research, as we have found out, it's just a model. It's just a way of describing the world as opposed to the world. And we know how it's been made. We know it's been made with flat plane measurement, therefore Earth is flat, but you can describe it as a sphere unless you take the step of reification to decide that that model description of the flat world we actually stand on is therefore a spherical world, violating the measurements you used to get the model in the first place. Speaking of which, any evidence of an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
Not a possibility.
Never in a million years.
Well, they haven't applied the Haversine formula to the flat plane yet. So why would they have a curved baseline?
Why would you need to apply a Haversine conversion formula to create a spherical surface if the world is already spherical? Why would that be necessary?
Because Santiago was not to be touched.
Because if Santiago was not to be touched and your orders are always followed, why would it be necessary to transfer him off the base? If the Earth's a sphere and it's got a spherical surface, why would it be necessary to convert it to spherical? Anybody?
Yeah. Can't handle it, man.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh.
The truth is we're on a flat plane, though, isn't it? That's the truth.
I want the truth.
Maybe that's why they change it into a sphere after measuring it flat, because they can't handle the truth that it's flat.
Bingo.
Are we all liking this A Few Good Men reference, by the way? With why would it be necessary to transfer Santiago off the base if your orders are always follow and Santiago wasn't to be touched? As in,
I love it.
Why would it be necessary to convert from a flat measurement to a spherical surface if we're standing on a spherical surface?
I love it.
What about that elevation angle measurement from a curve baseline? I mean, if people have reified that globe model that comes from a flat plane measurement into the world they're standing on, is there any evidence that you can actually acquire that measurement that made the model from the believed to be curved surface you think you're standing on?
No one in the history ever has measured an elevation angle from a curved baseline. No one, ever.
Any evidence that the distance to the sun?
Hold on.
Okay, I'm holding.
Why
I'm holding.
is that? Why is that then?
Because
Well, first of all, words mean things, and you have to define what you mean when you say elevation angle. So what's an angle and what's a sextant? What kind of tool is it? What does it measure? Measures angles. And then you got to say, what's an angle?
two straight lines meeting at a vertex. Let's answer them.
Exactly.
2 straight lines meeting at a vertex. Straight, not bent. Can't have a bent one.
So Tent said nobody ever in history has done that. And I asked why. It's because you can't, correct?
Can't get an angle from a curve. You need 2 straight lines meeting at a vertex. Next question was, what's a sextant? Well, it's an angle measuring device.
Oh dear.
Any evidence the distance to the sun?
What some of,
Oh, go on,
sorry,
come on,
Nathan.
Deck.
Just
My
saying
bad.
what some of these idiots are saying now is that we don't actually use the Earth's surface. What they're trying to say when they're on sea level navigating using flat baseline.
Sorry, let me just get this straight. You're saying their rebuttal is to say, when finding your position on Earth's surface and attempting to navigate Earth's surface and taking a measurement whilst looking at Earth's surface, they're not using Earth's surface. Correct?
Yep, that's correct. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, this wasn't a joke. You actually mean this with sincerity. I'm just a little bit taken aback.
Yes,
We're talking about
this
navigation.
is serious,
though.
Nathan.
Sorry, whilst arguing about navigation, their rebuttal is a bit like when they say we're not talking about Earth curve because we've debunked it. When we debunk the notion of navigating on a spherical surface, their response is, we're not talking about the surface.
Yep.
What were you going to say, Chocolate?
Nah, I just said that checks out.
Well,
Yeah,
what
but that's not new either,
No.
Tent.
No, what they're doing, one deck, and you know it, and we all know it, but for the audience sake, when they are not using the horizon with the horizon mirror that's on the sextant, say on an airplane, they use a bubble sextant, or if they're landlocked, they use a pan of mercury. And they have to have a fictitious baseline, which is a horizontal. So if you have a bubble sextant, the bubble, the spirit level in the sextant gives you your horizontal baseline, which furthermore proves that when you do use the Earth's horizon, where the sky appears to meet the sea, that has to work the same because you get the same results. So that means sea level is that horizontal that's fictitious at the eye level, which they call the sensible horizon. So what are they actually doing is proving the fact that when you don't use a bubble sextant or the Pan-Mercury, but you're actually using the Earth's surface to navigate, it must match the other two, which is flat, horizontal all the way. The GP of the sun and the GP of the observer, that is one radius of the circle of equal altitude, straight. Unless radiuses are bent, which now they got bigger problem.
Well, what if you use the ground and the shadow cast upon it to measure an angle to the sun like Eratosthenes?
Did I already
Same
ask?
principle.
Did I already ask for distance to the sun? Did I cover that?
No, that you was getting ready to and it got stopped. That's why I brought it up.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Negative.
But you were about to launch into elevation angles, presumably with the sun, were you not?
Yeah, Eratosthenes measured an angle using an obelisk. Or so the claim goes, where he measured from the tip of the shadow on the Earth to the top of the obelisk and measured an angle from that. That means he had to use a flat Earth to measure the angle to the sun.
Indeed.
Any distance in that?
It don't matter.
No, it's
Fun
an
to talk
angular.
about.
It's not for distance, Nathan. It's the angular relationship that they all, that's how the sextant works. It's never done for the distance to it, but the angular relationship to the surface that you're measuring from.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
What is it?
Currently, it's the bending of a fourth dimensional space-time in pseudo-Riemannian fourth space geometry, mathematics.
What was it before?
Mass attracting mass.
Well, when I
let's stick
was
with the news.
well, when I was in the cigar bar yesterday, that subject came up, and I had my iPhone on the side table between me and the person I was talking to. And I said, "What's holding up this iPhone?" He says, "The table." And I said, "Why is it holding it up?" "Because it's stronger, blah, blah, blah." And then I said, "Now watch this." I move it out in the open air. And I said, "If I let go, what's going to happen?" He says, "It's going to hit the ground." And he says, "Well," and I said, "Why is it going to hit the ground?" He says, "Because it's heavy." And I said, "So the medium is no longer the table, which is more denser than the phone. It's the air, and the phone is more dense than the medium it's in, correct?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, so when Newton's apple falls, what's happening there?" So I went through your illustration of, first of all, you got to put a seed in the ground and it grows up to be an apple tree. The limb now has an apple growing from it, and the stem dries out when the apple is time for harvest, and it breaks. Is the apple heavier than the air? He goes, "Yeah." And the whole room just got it. It's just that simple. There's no gravity.
Shout out to
It's the benefits
Elvis.
of the Socratic method.
That sounded like Mitchell. Who said that? Ray. Hey, Ray.
Hey, how you going? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were about to do your shout out for the super chat.
That's okay. Shout out to Elvis Kofovic, who says, "No sun here, or no sun yet here in South Florida Bay Area." I assume that's what SF means. Thank you very much for the super chat, Elvis. Really appreciate your support. Yeah, nah. What were you saying?
I was just sort of replying to 10th, just saying that's one of the beauties of the Socratic method of questioning. You sort of lead them on their own journey, and they sort of figure these things out on their own without any of the bullshit, rhetoric. Really, they just sort of going, oh yeah, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's all logical, and then they get there in the end, and it sounds like what sort of happened in Tent's example there.
You want to?
It did.
Did you want to define for our audience what the Socratic method is, please, Raymond? Is it Raymond?
My mum calls me Raymond, and my girlfriend, when she's angry at me, calls me Raymond. Otherwise, it's pretty much just Ray. But I'm probably going to screw this up.
Okay, Raymond, can you get
my
on with it?
understanding of the Socratic, sorry. My understanding of the Socratic method is sort of around. Oh God, I don't even know how to articulate it.
Come on,
Alright.
Raymond.
Getting people to.
The Socratic method
I know what it is.
is
in my
agreeing
head, I
on
just don't know how to
terms,
articulate it.
basically.
Go
So
ahead.
meeting in terms of definitions. That's what the Socratic method is. So if for the sake of argument, you're trying to describe a kind of, in some times of the year it's kind of green coloured, but other times of the year it's kind of red coloured, and it's kind of hard, and you can eat it, and it kind of slips down your throat with kind of watery consistency while still being hard, and it kind of hangs off one of those big plant things that grows up quite high. Do you know what I'm talking about? So it's like a fruit, and it's kind of, they dangle, and occasionally they'll fall to the ground.
The hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's like a hanging fruit, biblical. What am I talking about? You know what I'm talking about, right? Do you not know what I'm talking about? That's good, because I've been vague enough to make sure that you don't know what I'm talking about. Good. If we're describing what an apple is, we have to both agree in terms of what an apple actually is. Now, if we don't have a word for it, we have to come to a consensus between the two people that are discussing it, what the word that you will use means. So if we don't have the word apple and I'm describing a fruit, we have to describe what it is and agree upon terms before we can move forward in a discussion. Because if I'm describing an apple and I don't say the word apple, and I haven't done a good enough job of getting us to meet in the middle of what that actually means when I describe it, then in your mind I'm describing a plum, and in someone else's mind I'm describing a tangerine, but in my mind I'm describing an apple. So you have to go through the steps of defining what the terms used were. So when I say a plant growing out of the ground, you have to meet of minds that it's a tree. When I say, something dangling, you go, right, so a sort of spherical fruit with a stalk, that's called an apple. Right, oh yes, I do vaguely remember it being called that. Yes, we'll both agree on the term apple. Yeah? That's the Socratic method. Agreeing on terms. Because if you don't define terms, you end up with a situation, sorry Jaron, you're going to be used as this teaching tool from now on, where you don't define what the term you use means. For example, experiment. So we're on the any scientific evidence of gravity question. Well, the scientific evidence comes with certain prerequisite parts, and those are hypothesis, a phenomena, and an actualization of the hypothesis. But when you use the word hypothesis, or indeed experiment, you have to define what that means. So does experiment mean the colloquial definition? Like if you're on your bike, this is a quantum eraser example, and you're pedaling around on the BMX course doing jumps, you're experimenting with your bike. Is that a reasonable use of the term? Yeah. Does it transfer across when you define scientific vernacular? No, it does not. In scientific vernacular, experiment means actualization of hypothesis, or hypothesis test. That's what it actually means when you're talking about natural science. So if you don't meet with the Socratic method and define what terms actually mean, then you're going to end up at cross purposes and in arguments where you end up getting called a scammer because the person who's calling you a scammer doesn't understand what the words they're using mean. That's the Socratic method. Sorry, Jaron, this is how it's going to be. You're going to be my teaching tool when it comes to ignorance of science. Shout out to Godzilla37. When the penny falls, you're still on a wet, spinning ball. But when it drops, yeah, it's flat. and you realize SF stands for San Francisco. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much, Godzilla, for the super chat and the correction.
I disagree. I disagree. I'm sorry. He knows
like
damn
that.
well.
He knows what? That SF stands for South Florida.
No, Jaren knows damn well what. I'm not counting ignorance. He knows damn freaking well.
Why are you divining his thoughts and motivations? You can only go on his actions, Neil. You can't divine his motives or his knowledge or his understanding. You can only show what he says and does. That's all you can do.
That's almost true.
Okay.
Almost.
Sometimes things speak to motivation, but go ahead, John. Correct me, feel free.
When you take out a citation and you add in words, right? When you add in words that aren't there in order to call someone else that you're supposed to be in a community with a scammer, that's fraud. So fraud, you can definitely speak to intent with it, because there's no way that he didn't see that those words weren't there.
That's my point. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
but our
more
minds
egregious
tend
is
to fill in
the...
the blanks sometimes.
Go ahead, Righteous, sorry.
I was just gonna say sometimes our minds fill in the blanks.
When you fill in the blanks in a citation, that's called fraud.
Well, it is...
All these Jaren
Right, and
sympathizers.
sometimes it just
He didn't intentionally do it this one time. He had it.
You're breaking up. Eli, you're going to have to find a better signal because we can't make out what you're saying. But
He's a Jaren sympathizer anyway.
I realise. That's fine. I do want to hear what he's got to say because we had a 2-hour discussion on this off air yesterday. So anyway, completely lost track now. What's more egregious is the fact that what was added completely got contradicted by what was actually in the citation. I.e. where he added, but doesn't prove anything, or words to that effect, I'm paraphrasing. What it actually said was, requires experiment. You know, it's just like, it's describing how you prove things in the citation. He's saying the citation says it doesn't prove anything by way of the words he added to it. That's particularly egregious when he's using that to back his claims, I'm a scammer.
It was the same, Nathan, as when Kosho came here with a citation from thought.co and Chocolate actually read it out and said the opposite.
Well, hold on a sec, because it said empirical evidence. It didn't say experiment per se, as I remember it. But I know it did say empirical evidence.
Correct. That's much more. That's much stronger. My bad. I wish I'd remembered it correctly.
Yeah.
I put that in the video. I trimmed it out of QE saying it's because it weren't my words. It was his. Wasn't.
No,
yeah.
I'm just.
Go ahead.
Burn up like a badger. I'm so mad about that. That's just not right. That's fraud. You can't defend it any other way than that's fraud.
Right, back to the Socratic method. It said empirical evidence in the actual citation, as opposed to therefore doesn't prove anything. It said requires empirical evidence. Well, when you look up empirical evidence, if you're going through the Socratic method, it says to test by experiment. That's what it gives you as an example of an empirical definition. So you're like, okay, so to test by experiment would be to give you an empirical outcome. And in the citation in regards to what the scientific evidence gives you, and what it requires, it's empirical, as opposed to doesn't prove anything. Anyway, any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Nope. They can't do it. It all rests on presuppositions.
So they're pseudosciences then.
Well, what if they had an energetic background that was sort of like in a different dimension where you could create waves using a graph, right? You put space in one spot, time on the other. Wouldn't
like
that,
a framework?
Yeah, like a framework, an energetic framework.
Yeah, I can maths that. I mean, I can't.
What
Einstein
is it,
can,
though?
but yeah. Yeah. you can come up with a framework.
You know that the ball Earth is also a framework, right?
Yeah.
Radius value, all that.
Yes, we are aware. But thank you for
Right?
pointing
So
it out.
you can't prove that then either.
No, you're reading between the lines here, Arwin. This is flat Earth debate, and the current rhetoric is a heliocentric one. In spite of the fact that we have had recent encounters with Etherians, doesn't change that when we state this and talk about logical frameworks, the inference is actually global, Arwin. I know you're taking the inference to be etheric. It isn't. It could be if you're that way inclined, but I shouldn't have said global. Nature of the Earth related, as opposed to etheric or global.
Well, no, I was talking about space-time. Why would you ever think I was talking about the ether?
I mean, neither.
But because they say the exact same words, John, and it's understandable, and I appreciate, now that it's you I'm talking to, Arwin, doing that, because that's incredibly useful to draw that parallel. Why would you take that inference when nobody asked you to read between the lines? Because people on the flat Earth side used the exact same trick. That's why. Right, as there's a small pause, I'm going to do a couple of quick shout-outs. So shout out to Jardo, or Jardu, Jardu. Am I saying that right? How would you
Jado.
say that? I normally ask Arwin when there's Jado.
I just call him Jado.
Jado. Thank you very much, Jado. He says, Jaren used to listen to you on his morning walk. What happened to my family? I don't understand the second part. Jaren used to listen to you on his morning walk, Nathan. Full stop. What happened to my family?
It's pretty obvious. He's meaning that the community was a family to him.
What happened to my family? Yeah, it's sad.
Us.
It's sad, Jardo, because in spite of the differences between Globebusters, who attacked me viciously 4 years ago when I pointed out that they were hijacking science the same as the Globe did with their claims of experimentation, when they didn't understand what the word meant because they hadn't gone through the Socratic method, I tried to take them through the Socratic method in terms of defining what words they were hijacking to claim science for ether, and I got attacked viciously for it. Now, that I was more than willing to set aside and not just bundle Jaren in with these clowns that use science to claim ether and such, because I always saw Jaren as a respectable character. And it's only during this time that I've gone, okay, I have to now sever ties with this person because they're not what I expected of them, and that's disappointing. And in a way, it does sadden me too. Maybe you can hear that in my voice, I don't know. But yeah, it is saddening because I expected better. When I read people talking in a shill context about, he's here just to drive a stake through the community and split everyone apart, talking about Jaren. On the one hand, I understand why they're saying that. And I understand the implications of me defending myself against being called a scammer for lying about science and the method proving things. Just drop that in so I don't get called out for reification when I haven't contextualized it. Anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. And that is exactly the case. When it happened to me 4 years ago, though, I wasn't a big enough channel for anyone to give a toss. It's not like my channel was big enough to be claiming to be splitting a community in two. It just cost me dearly as a tiny little YouTuber trying to grow and feed my family with that living. And it cost me dearly because Bob decided I was wrong about the science magic tricks that he's persisted in using ever since. Now we're at the time where apparently I'm big enough to divide a community with someone who's got 160-odd thousand subs, which I just don't think is true. But on the other hand, I appreciate the sentiment, which is to say, this is sad. Shouldn't we all be shoulder to shoulder in spite of differences, as opposed to being called a scammer by Jaren because I'm going against Bob saying science proves this, that, and the other? Which is all this really boils down to. Sad. Very much agree with you. I'm sorry to drone on a little bit about it, Jardu. Now I've had contextually what you mean by what happened to my family. Now I understand what you mean. You're tearing Jar apart, says the price of Adam. Thank you for the super chat. And also Elvis, super chats again, said Jaren, stop walking. I don't think he lost use of his legs, Elvis, but maybe leisure walks is what you're referring to. In any event, I know, yeah, I vaguely remember Jaren saying that he used to listen to the Flat Earth Debate Show. He even used to be a Patreon at one stage for about a month or two. But then he quickly severed his Patreon support when I went to Globebusters and told them that they were using the same magic tricks we've been chopping off Globers' heads with for the previous 12 months leading up to that point.
That's the difference. You never called them a scammer. You were just trying to, correct them in certain areas and open their eyes up to what's going on. And that's how this whole thing started, and it festered. I don't care what you say. It's festered for all these years to the point where they're calling you a scammer. I'm sorry. It's black and white to me.
Well, my motivation was slightly different because I wanted to take a proactive approach to something that I saw could easily go badly if I didn't proactively do something about it. And, if QE was here, I'd discuss with you now what we discussed at the time, and there was a lot of discussion about this because it had to be approached delicately. Now, I've listened back to the show and felt that I did a good job in the first part with my presentation, and then after the fact, although everyone's blood pressure's getting higher and higher, I felt I did a reasonably good job of keeping it on subject and saying we're just talking about science proving things. And, the correction for Globebusters came as a result of realising that the sword cuts both ways. You can't go around chopping off Globers' heads with, what science have you got? You say you got an experiment, what was the independent variable? Let's get the pink writing out. And then just tolerate or turn a blind eye, let's say, to one of your own, if you want to call it that, what happened to my family, using the same trick. Going, check out my experiment, now look at my parlour trick as I watch a bit of paper dance up and down.
I don't
So-
think you should have to apologize for having principles. That seems weird to me.
Well,
By the way,
nothing's
they still
changed.
call it an experiment.
People can go back and look, John. So, yes, there's going to be surface dwellers that come along and go, you're a scumbag, you're splitting the community, and Jaron's right, with a baseless assertion, rebuttal. But it really matters not because people can go back through 4 years of debate and see every Glober ever come here with claims of science or accidentally say experiment and then die on their ass as they're asked for their independent variable and what the observed phenomena was. People can see that. So when people go, he's wrong, science doesn't prove anything. Really? Watch 4 years of Globers having their ass handed to them when they accidentally say they've got an experiment in reference to Cavendish or something else. Cavendish being gyroscopes, by the way. Gyroscopes and pendulums. Gizmos and gadgets that are used to claim Earth's spinning. As opposed to gadgets and gazmos, the same exact gadgets and gazmos that are being used to claim ether exists. It's just instead of gadgets and gizmos, they're called gadgets and gazmos. They're the exact same thing. It doesn't make any difference what you call them. You just reassert the fallacy that's used to claim they're proving Earth spinning to claim the exact same fallacy proves there's ether rotation. It's just, you pointing that out to somebody who's using that magic trick to guru the community, they're not going to like you for it. But, as you grow, you get told that you're splitting the community when you defend yourself against being called a scammer. Funny times, funny times. But yeah, you can go back. We haven't changed our tune, have we?
Nathan, I don't look at it any other way than this is a good thing. Because, when you're listening to someone, you want to know who they are after the mic is shut down and the show's over. You were finding out who people are by the words they use. And so I think it's a good thing to reveal to whoever's listening what you stand for. You've been pretty steady. And if Jaron wants to come out and say what he's got to say, it's going to reveal a lot about his character. And people could decide. This is what you want. You want the truth. And if the truth is they can't defend an argument and they got to call you a scammer, well, that's what needs to be seen by everybody.
You can't handle the truth. Shout out to Godzilla37 who says, a lot of this could have been avoided in my opinion. If they'd used the words electrostatics, in quotes, rather than ether, that word is loaded, and without its use, we could have found some common ground.
So what's electrostatics?
That's incredibly funny.
No, when they denied the atom or molecules, particles, when they deny that, there's no common ground. It's either right or it's wrong.
Thanks for the super chat, Godzilla.
Yeah, it was funny.
Well, can I finish?
But look, yeah, go ahead.
It depends.
so-
Is it a single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Well, no, that's not possible. I'm just going to finish the statement about now people could decide who they want to follow based on the back and forth. What more can you ask for? I mean, here we are saying we got in this place because the ballers used pseudoscience and draped it as real science. And we're saying, no, we want real science, and this is the scientific method. And we don't want even the flat earther doing that about something. That's what we're guilty of. That is the only thing we're guilty of is saying, stay true. Don't do the same thing that got us in the mess in the first place. And for that, you're being called a scammer. So I let people decide who they're going to follow, who they're going to support. Based on that, I know the decision I've made.
And man, just because
Nathan.
you don't understand the Michelson-Morley experiment, you don't have to call it a parlor trick. It advanced science. We wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for the Michelson-Morley experiment.
Well, hang on, Neil. Before the Michelson-Morley experiment is on the table for discussion, if it was even a real experiment, because it has to be observed in nature first. It has to be real. Okay. Let's talk about Bob saying science proves things, Whitsitt saying science proves things, and Jaring saying science doesn't prove things, and then misquoting a reference or citation. They got problems in their own camp, and they're over here hailing, throwing rocks at FED. Are you kidding me? Why don't you fix that first? And then we could go to the so-called experiment called Michelson-Morley.
Right. You said something about Netflix, Nathan?
I haven't finished housekeeping, but thank you for reminding me. I have got it in the forefront of my mind to cover that. Although, did I ask for gas pressure without a container already? Because I want to leave that till last, even if we've asked it.
No.
So, any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
That's funny.
Well, they at least tried to
Oh.
predict it, and then they were catastrophically wrong every step.
What, by doing sonograms on the Earth?
Sonograms. It's one way of calling it.
C waves and S waves, right? Sonograms?
Yeah, I suppose.
Doing a sonogram on the Earth.
Yeah, right, if they got the predictions right. It's a girl! Wait, you said it was a boy!
But to be fair, though, it does work great in dirt and sand, right? But as soon as you hit that hard rock, that's when it's just like this sound. It's just gonna resonate with the entire body of it. So it's almost impossible to use sonograms to get any accuracy like within hard rock. I mean, in the dirt, it works great. They use it now to excavate ruins and all that under the dirt, but you can't get it through hard rock. It's just not doable.
Wait, hold on. How will you measure the return angle of the signal without a flat baseline?
You
won't.
can't.
You won't.
The reason they make a mistake with the hard rock is they take it for granted.
Very good.
Yeah, and then they just went to heavy metal after that.
Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
Hold on a second. You're telling me I'm moving? Let me fasten my seatbelt.
No, Neil, you're not moving. The ground is moving.
Oh, so I wouldn't even notice it, really, if the ground was moving at such a rate, because Earth is so big. I wouldn't even feel the movement. I got it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always moving, worms and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The worms.
Those wiggly worms
I
making
forgot
the
about
ground
that
move.
Well, isn't any change in vector considered a change in acceleration if we feel acceleration?
Yes. This is a point that Ute Hube from the comment section was keen to call us out for being shills for never mentioning, I'm sure in a very light-hearted way. But yeah, the heliocentric model's got many vector changes in the many different travel directions that it's got. So that would induce various different speed alterations as you whirled around on what is essentially a giant waltzer.
Right, or like the cup ride, at the carnival.
Yeah, waltzer, same thing.
So
Going
is
in
it
all
possible that
directions.
Well, his thing was always, well, doesn't some aircraft have to speed up? Because if I'm, let's say, in New York, where supposedly the rotation of the Earth, the tangential velocity of the Earth is slower than at a lower altitude, like let's say if I'm in Florida, wouldn't the plane have to actually speed up to maintain with the Earth moving faster? Like, that's crazy, and that never happens.
Nah, chocolate. No, the
But it
gravity just keeps it in lockstep, right? Gravity, when something is in orbital motion and it goes like out an outer rim, like an outer ring part, because it's like elliptical, then gravity just starts pulling harder on it for some reason. And that's how it all, remains in its orbit, despite all the
Oh, shit, let's
forces
go.
from.
That's what's up. What's gravity then?
Bending of pseudo-Riemannian for space-time.
Yes, it's a hole in space, and things are
Pseudo?
drawn towards that position.
It's not a hole in space. No.
Yeah, it is.
Space implies Euclidean 3 space. Space is the area. So you can say you're existing in a space right now. But that's very much length, breadth, and depth, as opposed to length, breadth, depth, and time. So if you describe this in the Einsteinian fourth dimensional space-time, then you're not describing a hole in space. Although they call space, outer space, a space, the geometry is not space, because space is Euclidean, and fourth dimensional space-time isn't that. It's a completely different geometry. Space-time.
it's almost like
Yeah, a hole
counter
in
space,
space.
right?
It's a hole in
Yeah,
space.
that need lines to be read between, but yes. Thank you, John.
Are you saying that there cannot be
What?
a hole in a vacuum? Why not? I mean, there's already so
what
much
the
space
hell?
in space.
Where-
So
This is
Where are we
back to
told
Socratic
that
Method 101.
Space-time is a hole in the donut?
Space-time is a hole in a vacuum. What the bloody hell's he
the
on
hole in
about?
the donut, man.
Yeah, I would go through defining terms, but time is very limited. Let's not do that. Let's move on. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure, that's the air pressure that we're all breathing, without a container to press upon?
yes, I had a whole discussion about that because apparently rockets being able to thrust themselves within a vacuum somehow, despite gas moving in all directions and not building pressure against other gas, that proves that it's possible.
Sorry, when I said without a container, was that example demonstrated without a container?
Well, yes, because if there was a container, then you couldn't actually get to the vacuum with a rocket.
What vacuum?
The one the rocket still functions in, despite not having anything to press against with its thruster.
Which
Listen,
vacuum?
guys.
Which vacuum would that be? There are no natural vacuums. What are you talking about? Where is this vacuum?
That's outside of the Earth, so second law of thermodynamics doesn't apply.
Sorry, you're saying because it's outside of the Earth, the laws of nature don't apply to gas anymore? They're like rebellious gas particles when they go beyond Earth's sphere-shaped air, aka atmosphere.
Yeah, well, do you see any nature in space? No, it's just a vacuum. And
Space.
rocks. So there's not a lot of nature.
There you go again with your three-dimensional space. Is there any nature in the space? Yeah, even by NASA's own definition, space starts at sea level. Space is just the space that we occupy.
Arwen, can I take this to a fourth dimensional realm, please?
No.
What do you mean, no?
No.
My criticism is that Arwen's not talking in the fourth dimensional realm. He's hijacking Euclidean terminology when describing a vacuum because he's got an area. That would be a space. Well, just because you've got an area, the only areas we experience have gas pressure in them. Now, if you're going to say, no, there exists a second law of thermodynamics violation, but the violation doesn't apply because it's outside of nature. It's like, well, who's experiencing outside of nature? If they're experiencing it, it's within nature and it's within the space. You can also call the space that gas is within, that we're occupying, a volume. And you can calculate the pressure.
No, hold on.
I'm
There we
sorry,
go.
I saw the moon
Hold on.
landing
John
with
didn't
my
like
own
that.
eyes on television.
John first. Go ahead, John.
We got to have some kind of framework to explain these phenomena we see. Like
What
the
phenomena? What do you mean?
atmosphere.
What bloody
The
phenomena?
atmosphere.
Hold on. No, I'm not having that. He's talking about rockets moving in a vacuum that's been presupposed to have rockets in. He hasn't told me which vacuum, and then he's hijacked Euclidean terminology for an area that's described with Einsteinian force space, somewhere that doesn't exist, and saying that in the area that doesn't exist, that violates natural law, I will assume is actually in existence because it's not in nature, even though a rocket's travelling through it with men in it. That's his argument.
Yes, and I saw it. It was recorded, so it's true.
Excuse me. The thing I want all your generation to know that you can't leave the Earth. The Earth is a closed system. So all this
Yeah.
crap you guys are talking is crazy.
Okay, so Chocolate's
Well, hold on a
quoting.
sec, 'cause-
Hold on.
Well, they can
Let's
still
just
send
contextualise.
robots.
Hold on. Let's just contextualise what Chocolate's just done. He's taken a quote from a NASA employee high up in NASA describing how we cannot escape from Earth's low Earth orbit when assumed to be a sphere with orbital motion because it's a closed system. We're all stuck here. Now, this has been echoed by various other pseudoscience pretender clowns like Bill Nye, but the sentiment is currently we are in a closed system that we have no technology to get behind. And when they're asked, well, how do we get to the moon then? Oh, well, that was old technology and we can't get that back yet. But ultimately, we're being described as being
though,
in a...
isn't it?
Go on, Adam.
But it's reassuring to know that NASA have said to us, don't worry, you're not going to lose your gas pressure. The system is closed. No matter what else they're saying, you're always going to be able to breathe. It's not just going to leave. It's closed.
Okay, so this is a nice transition as we've now moved on to space. So somebody in the pre-show brought up the fact that they've got the Armageddon-esque rhetoric in the current mainstream media about travelling out to a second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum to intercept rocks on an orbital trajectory. That's a begging the question fallacy trajectory in a Narnia space that doesn't exist. And we need to combat this, presumably by pumping billions into a black hole that is a pseudo-Ramonian force space time dimension that doesn't exist beyond maths. Because obviously we need to be greatly concerned with these Narnia rocks in a sky vacuum that doesn't exist. So, with that in mind, I wanted to talk about my wife's been watching a show on Netflix called The Crown, and there's a particular episode that caught my attention, or she brought it to my attention, where the Duke of Edinburgh is discussing the moon landings with the three protagonists in that particular story. And the main prevailing theme of this meeting between he's not the king, but he's effectively like the king. He's the husband of the Queen of England at the time, the Duke of Edinburgh, who's a pilot, has flown up to 50,000 feet just to see what he can see. He's all excited about meeting these guys who've been to the moon. It must be the single most exciting thing in their entire existence. He's, chomping at the bit to meet with them. He's asked for more time than they've allotted on their tour. Excuse me. When he finally sits down with them, and this is obviously a dramatisation, but what's been written into the script is their total nonchalant attitude towards what they've done. Their down-in-the-mouth behaviour, their nondescript, vague explanations for things that weren't related to what anybody would be excited about in regards to their endeavour travelling to the claim to be moon in a sky vacuum. What they're talking about is, oh, remember that exciting story, Buzz, where Neil was like, oh, you tell it, Neil. Oh, yeah, I was in the module and I heard this bang, bang, banging. And we were all looking around at each other asking what the banging was. And we went to the back and you know what we found? It was the heater. And that was their story that they told the Duke of Edinburgh. That was the single story that they told him. And when asked and quizzed about what it looked like to look back at the Earth, what it looked like from space, what the stars look like, all the sort of questions that were asked by who's the Sky at Night guy, Patrick Moore. Same questions that they were asked by Patrick Moore, or similar. They went, oh, we just looked at checklists. Oh, we didn't have time to look out the window. We weren't concerned with any of those sorts of things. We were just following the motions of our checklist. You know how it's like. You've been in the military. That was their answers. And after the fact, bearing in mind that they've all got colds, so they're all sick. So, again, making them seem weak while they're discussing their endeavour as the greatest human achievement of all kind of mankind, and they're all sniffling and seeming sick and feeble. And that's what obviously the takeaway and discussion point with the Queen thereafter is from the Duke of Edinburgh. I put them up on this pedestal because they've achieved man's greatest achievement, and they're all sniffling and weak, and they've got nothing interesting to say, and they had no decent stories. They weren't enthusiastic. It's like, what a disappointment, you know. And that notion of the disappointment he experienced when not being given anything that you would expect from these people, and their very low-key, very down-in-the-mouth attitude as they were discussing this stuff with him, very short answers, you know, stilted stories of heaters banging. You got the impression that there was something very much awry, and that was the notion that was put across thereafter. There's something not quite right here. Anyway, that's the conclusion to it. The notions that were being put out weren't, look at man's greatest achievement and their visit to the Brits and meeting with the King and Queen, in effect, and telling them all about our great achievements. It's, we had a heater banging, we didn't look out the window, we followed protocols, we did our checklists. Thank you for having us. that was the sum total of their interaction. And I was like, yeah, that's incredibly telling. Like I say, enough for my wife to go, come and have a look at this. And there's enough, you know, moon and space related stuff for her to not just do it because it's moon or space related. Most stuff on telly, or in this case Netflix, is like that. This was different enough for her to go, come and have a look at this. This will definitely be of interest for you to make as a discussion point. Hence, I've done that. So there you go. There's my story of The Crown. It's an episode where the royals meet the astronauts shortly after claiming to have landed on the moon, lying about going through a sky vacuum to travel to that light in the sky that is definitely not, as they claim, in a sky vacuum. But there we go. Anybody got any comments? Now we've done the housekeeping at 53 minutes into the live show.
I gotta check it out. But you know what the most watched Netflix show is at the moment in 60 different countries? Dharma.
I don't know what that is. I don't watch Netflix.
Dahmer's the dude that ate people.
Yes. So that's what the world wants to see.
He ate people on the moon.
Well, it's getting winter, you know, so people are getting hungry.
Actually, it's the kid that was in X-Men that played the guy that moves super quick in the X-Men. He plays Dharma. Anyway, but I got to check this thing out. What is it called, Nathan? The Crown?
Yeah, but it's like, I couldn't tell you what episode or series it was. There's obviously been loads of them. My wife's been fairly addicted to it, and which is unfortunate.
Do you think?
Go on.
Do you think that because the way you're describing that right now, do you think like maybe, because I don't, this is a fictional show you're talking about, right? This is something dramatized, right? Okay, so do you think like that's some sort of I want to say a continuation, but based on the way the astronauts acted when they came back, right? You know how Globus tell us, oh, you guys were just looking at them, you know, you shouldn't pay that any mind. Do you think that maybe that's like I don't know, some type of an extension to that? Like it really wasn't as big of a deal as it should be, being that it's humankind, you know, greatest achievement.
If you want a reasonably good analysis of this, Richard D. Hall, who's very much an anti-flat earther, I might add, but he asked a pseudoscientist, psychologist, whatever he was, behavioral analyst. So, you know, I like the behavioral panel. A guy like that. he gave the, I think it was that actual interview with, I keep forgetting his name, Patrick Moore. He gave that to a behavioural analyst to assess for the same things that the behavioural panel assess, which is red flags and markers. No, it's not within his baseline. No, they're not behaving like they normally do when they're being interviewed. This is distinctly different behaviour. Yeah, that sort of stuff. And he analysed all of that and came to the conclusion that they weren't telling the truth, that they were, I can't remember how he phrased it. He phrased it in a very, behavioural panel-esque diplomatic way, but ultimately wasn't like, yeah, these guys are just telling you about going to the moon. That was definitely not the conclusion that he came to. Now, he paid this guy independently to do it. That's Richard D. Hall. He's the guy. I don't mind shouting him out, despite the fact that he absolutely hates us as flat earthers, because he did a very good job, a very unbiased job, by basically passing it off to somebody and paying them to just analyse it impartially. And that's what he got. He got his money's worth. He then published it. And yeah, well worth checking out if it's available. It might be behind a paywall. But in any event, if you can find it out, it's well worth checking out the behavioural analysis of the returning quote-unquote moon landing party and / astronaut that orbited the moon in the claimed sky vacuum, Collins, right? So yeah, that's something you should check out. But like with any of these pseudoscientists, it only lends a little bit of credence to the notion that we already know is true. We know they're lying because they haven't travelled through the pressure that we're breathing into a vacuum. Because if they can travel into a vacuum, so can the high pressure gas we're breathing. We'd all be dead if they travelled through a vacuum to the moon. They didn't. It's a lie. We know they're lying.
Yeah, how could we be breathing?
For anyone interested, it's season 3, episode 7, and it's called Moon Dust.
Moon Dust. My wife's actually in the room for just by pure coincidence. We're talking about that show, hun, that you put in front of me, whatever season that this gentleman's very kindly just dug out for us. But yeah, well worthy of discussion because it's as interesting as their actual interviews in terms of how they were depicted. It was, I'm not going to say accurate, but very much akin with their attitudes. That's what I've been discussing. Just telling my wife. I shouldn't really do that. Very unprofessional.
What I find interesting on that, Nate, is sorry, feedback from Discord or the audience. This is a semi-fictional dramatisation of the Queen's, whoever's life, but they've bothered to put this in that these guys were so miserable. Yeah, if you're going to rewrite history and tweak things, so I know it's coming from, it'll be royal memoirs, but the royal memoirs that these guys were so miserable about the greatest achievement that it's pervaded into that series, which I find interesting. They've not rewrote it because they were just a bit miserable that day, but they were still absolutely brilliant. The obviously outstanding memory is what a bunch of miserable gits they were. Now that, when you're analysing psychology, you get me?
That's the most interesting aspect of it, exactly. Because what would your attitude be having done that? Would it be down in the mouth? Would it be like you've just found a mouse dropping in your cornflakes?
No, but
Can I comment?
You're meeting the king and the queen, right? You make up, you write on your CV, you make shit up, don't you? You just something to say. You've just been to the moon. You've not got to make anything up. Do you know what I mean? You've just got to tell them, and jaws will drop.
That was something I forgot to add on. Sorry, there was one other aspect I forgot to mention, Adam, as you've just reminded me. So they're down in the mouth. They've done all the things I've just described. Not enthusiastic. But then after that's finished and he's got out his questions and he's kind of taken aback and disappointed, it then goes to them saying, well, is there anything else then? And they say, oh, can we ask you some questions? Suddenly their enthusiasm level soars and they start quizzing him about what it's like to live in a palace and what it's like to do, with the type of mirroring the type of enthusiasm he was expecting was the enthusiasm they got for asking him questions about being the Duke of Edinburgh and living in a palace. They intentionally put that in a way that was like stark. I'm surprised I didn't remember it off the bat, actually, but really stark that their enthusiasm for him and what he did was mirroring the expected enthusiasm for travelling to the moon.
Guys, why do you expect them to be enthusiastic? My son told me they had to go in quarantine for at least 60 days when they got back.
That was a debrief to know how to lie. Hey, if you go to that video I posted on this dart that supposedly hit that asteroid to the scene in the control room, they were more excited seeing a CGI event high-fiving each other than these astronauts who supposedly went to the moon.
Exactly. How ridiculous is that? Oh, look, it's a CGI red screen. Fantastic, fanfare, cheers. Oh, I just walked on the moon and drove a car and did all. Nah, I'm sad. Are you serious? Joke.
Shortly, can you imagine if you and I went to the moon? If me, you, Nathan, 10, and everybody went to the moon and came back, how do you think we would be?
I already told you, man. This is why this fascinates me, because again, not empirical proof of anything, but people know how people act, right? And if you've just achieved the greatest achievement that humans have achieved, you're going to act a certain way. I don't care if you've been in quarantine for 60 days. They weren't in quarantine when they were being interviewed, and you still did what you thought you did, right? So you wouldn't change now how you act. Okay, I got out of quarantine. Now I'm still the greatest shit since sliced bread because I was the person that walked on the moon before everyone else. So when I come back, I'm gonna need theme music. I'm gonna walk around with a cape. I'm gonna make a big deal out of it because I just did something no one else did.
You just saw Earth.
You
just saw Earth from the moon.
Demand the tapes buys into their rhetoric. We'll get into that after show. We know they didn't do any of this because they'd be violating the second law of thermodynamics. If they could travel out to a sky vacuum, the gas we breathe would fill the space. With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. Another massive thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, hit the PayPal link and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on an after show. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all with my flashing camera in the next video.
What a lovely day!